Hello and welcome into the Nittany Gritty, brought to you by the good folks at New Amendment. I am your host, Jon Sauber, the Penn State men's basketball and football beat writer at the Center Daily Times. I am joined by Penn State legend Tim Frazier. Tim, how's it going?
Man, it's going well, John. How about yourself, man?
I think you know the answer to that. Still dealing with the jet lag from Los Angeles, of course, being out there for the Rose Bowl. Like, listen, I have a bad sleep schedule anyways, right? Like, I go to bed at like 3 a.m. Eastern time. Well, I was going to bed at like 2 a.m., 3 a.m. Pacific time. So now I'm getting home and it's like 5 o'clock in the morning, 6 o'clock in the morning, and the sun's coming up, and I'm like, I should probably fall asleep sometime soon here.
Yeah, that's tough. But at the end of the day, shout out to the football team. You know, much needed, great win, finish the season for them. I think that just kind of hopefully it transitions to the fans being on such a high note that they start coming to more basketball games and the basketball team doing well. And it'll keep growing our Penn State family in the sports world.
Well, yeah, and that's the thing. Like, there's no excuse now, right? Like, during football season, especially with a 10-win team, right? This is a football university, but that's over now. It's early January. The basketball team is good, right? They have a reason to go and watch. The Bryce Jordan Center shouldn't be full. Like you and I have talked about this in the past. Anyone who goes to games knows this. Like, that place is never going to be full. They curtain it off for a reason, but like, it should be loud, right? Like, and there's some big games coming up. You know, this is a good time to try and learn about this team, right? If you're just a Penn State football fan trying to get into it, this is the time to go figure out what this team's like and enjoy it, because, you know, they're going to compete, right? This is going to be a team that competes all season. I think they're going to be in pretty much every game they play, which, you know, is pretty much all you can ask for at a university, whereas, you know, like, it's been a decade since the NCAA tournament happened. You were there when it happened, right? That's how long ago it was. Since then, you've carved out an NBA career. You're in Greece playing currently, right? Like, it has been a while. Like, things have happened. I was in high school. Like, this was not exactly yesterday that they last went to the NCAA tournament, but there's a real shot they do it now, and that's reason to go.
Yeah, man. Yeah. Thanks for bringing up my age, man. But showing how old I am. But it is crazy that you mentioned that, because I was sitting there talking in Greece. We had practice. We were talking. The players were talking about. We had a guy on our team went to North Carolina. A guy on our team went to Oklahoma State. So, you know, we talk banner with every team, what he's seen, you know, and they talk about, man, I'm like, guys, man, I was in college 10 years ago. Things have changed, you know. Players getting paid now. Like, it's a whole different ball game from when I was in school and we were still eating at the Nittany Hall, you know. So, but
well, and that's what, like, we had this media day where we could talk to like the whole roster when we were out in Los Angeles, so we could talk to the freshmen, right? And like, they're talking about Rose Bowls they remember, and one of them brings up like the Vince Young Rose Bowl against USC, and I was like, and someone followed up and was like, "Did you actually watch that?" Like, no, I saw highlights because I was only 4 years old when it happened. I was like, "Don't say that. Like, don't do that to me. I'm standing right here. Like, you don't have to do that."
Props to Houston legend Vince Young, man. I saw him in high school when I was in middle school, and then him going to Texas and being that. And Vince Young was amazing. I wish he had a better pro career, but, you know, obviously his career was still his career. So.
Yeah, no, I grew up on Vince Young, right? I had a Texas beanie. I grew up a Texas football fan because of Vince Young. I was like, I think it was 10 that year, 2005. Listen, math's hard. There's a reason I do words and not numbers, right? Like, I'm not gonna dive too far into that. Yeah. And you know, we can get into a little bit more to get back to the men's basketball team because of how well they're playing. We're gonna dive into some of the X's and O's here, right? Yeah. These last two games for Penn State, I don't want to say topsy-turvy, because it kind of was the result that we probably expected, right? Like, this is, you and I talk about all the time, people talk about all the time. It's really hard to win on the road in the Big Ten. So realistically, Penn State should have gone 1-1 against Iowa at home and Michigan on the road, and they did. So you can't complain a ton. But, you know, let's start out here with Iowa, a team that is not as good as it always is, right? As the program always is, but still lights it up, right? They can score as well as any in the country. What stood out to you from that game and how Penn State played in it? And for what it's worth, an 83-79 win for Penn State at the Bryce Jordan Center.
I will say, I don't think it was their best game, but I think it was a solid game throughout the whole game. And that was something that I took away from, you know, that specific against Iowa, that, you know, they didn't play the best. They weren't, you know, shoot lights out. Everything was crazy. They were on a run and just blow the team out the water. But they were consistent throughout the whole game. From the jump ball to the end, you know, they made a run. Iowa made a run. They answered the run. Every time Iowa started to get back, man, Penn State was able to stop it. Guys made big shots. Pickett played well, obviously, as he has been, and he kind of dominated the game as far as the pace goes, knowing when to score, when to slow down, when to get to the foul line. So I think that was the biggest thing. That I think they played a solid game throughout the whole game to take them over the edge and obviously get a win. And we obviously this is not the Iowa that we remember in the past, but they're always a tough team, just their style of play, because they've always got a big man that's always huge down low, and that has been the weakness for Penn State so far. Is the big man. So I think that Penn State did a great job sticking to their game plan and finishing throughout from the beginning to the end.
Yeah, and I think you bring up a great point with it being sort of close throughout, and basketball's a game of runs. Everyone knows this. Yes. I'm not breaking any news there, but with it goes to halftime and Penn State's up 18, and people are, I think the sentiment on the outside was like, oh, this is a dominating Penn State, win on the way. No, it was just kind of where it was at in the flow of it, right? Iowa was always going to respond because they're so good offensively, because Chris Murray is so good, right? He's going to play in the NBA. That was one thing, Micah Shrewsbury said in the postgame. He said he can't wait to see where he goes in the first round this year, right? Because that's the expectation. His twin brother Keegan, of course, playing for the Kinks now, it is going to happen. He plays all 40 minutes, by the way, so that shows you how important he is. The main thing you said, though, Jalen Pickett controlling the pace. How often do you think we're going to say that this year? Because that feels like it has been a thing all season. It's going to be a thing all season. And against Iowa, he just felt under control, right? Yep. It never felt like it got away from him. Even when the score would get close and they would make a run, it never felt like it got away from Pickett.
Yeah, and we're going to be saying that every game. In every game, especially every game that they win, because for them to win, Pickett has to play well, and not necessarily a scoring role, but he has to play well as far as, like you said, have you been saying, about controlling the pace, getting guys involved, rebounding, playing defense as well. Man, he, like you said, he's a bigger guard, bigger point guard than normal, being able to back guys in the post, being able to not necessarily score at the time, being able to kick out to the shooters on the outside. For every game that Penn State wins, and hopefully it will be many, I'm betting on it, is that he has to control the game, control the pace, and obviously play well. And he doesn't have to go out and do what he did tonight with the 27 or that night 27-7. But he has to do a good job of being able to get everybody involved as well as controlling the game.
Yeah, and of late it has been the scoring, right? It's 26 against Iowa, 26 against Michigan. And he just kind of gets wherever he wants. And I know Iowa doesn't have a great defense, right? This is always going to be an offense first team. But he still kind of got wherever he wanted and was able to do whatever he wanted. And that's going to be important because, like you said, it's not just about him, right? It's about him getting his looks, the defense having to react to him, and then, them collapsing down from the wing, guys getting open shots. They have shooters around him. This is, Iowa to me was the quintessential, this is what it looks like when it's at its best for Penn State's offense. It's Pickett scoring. It's them reacting, and it's him distributing to guys along the perimeter, and Iowa not kind of having an answer to that and not being able to do anything. Now, that being said, it got a little nervy down the stretch, right? It's 81-79, and, Iowa has the ball. Seth Lundy made a great play to rip the ball away and get in transition and pretty much end it there. But, that's the kind of play, by the way, and, people who followed Lundy, he was a Roman Catholic kid out of high school. There were some expectations because of Lamar Stevens also going to the school when they were teammates there and everything. He saw some expectations on both ends of the court that were probably unfair when he got to Penn State. But that play is how far he's come, right? This is a guy who is an offense-only guy his first couple of years. And the last 2 years, he's become one of the best defensive players in the Big Ten. That's you can speak to this more than I can because, I haven't played Division I college basketball. But that's not an easy play when a guy's on the move, and to rip it that cleanly and not get called for the foul, especially in the Big Ten where fouls get called a lot, that was really impressive.
Yeah, man, props to him for sure. It's one of the big-time steals, and especially saved the game. Not saying that I would have made a score, but don't even give him a chance to put the ball on the rim is huge. And for him to get his hand in there and have the knack to know where the ball is at, when it get in there and not get the foul, man. I think a lot of that goes too is that he has established himself as a big-time defender in the Big Ten, because that gives those refs a little bit more leeway to say, hey, man, he got that clean. Maybe than when he would have did it, his freshman year or his sophomore year, they might have been called a foul. But watching him play, I think he got it clean. And, that's huge defensive stop. And you're going to need that later on down the road when you have guys that we have to get a stop to win. And we need all 5 guys on the court to be locked in, slap the floor, and be ready to get a stop, get a rebound for us to win the game.
Yeah, and you know they kind of needed that defense last night. We're recording here on Thursday against Michigan, right? They needed better defense, frankly, from everyone around the perimeter. Penn State lose the game 79-69 in a game that I don't know about you, like it felt weird, right? Like every time Penn State cut it close, it kind of felt like Michigan kind of had some control still, right? Like it never felt like it was out of Michigan's grasp. The big thing here, I think, is going to be Hunter Dickinson, right? Like he's 7'1". You mentioned it earlier. Penn State doesn't have much size. They don't really have an answer to that. They went small to try and combat it. And honestly, like, I don't know how you feel about it. I thought it worked, right? Like they got him trying to defend on the perimeter. They beat him off the bounce a few times. They pulled him away from the rim on defense. On the other end of the court, it was a bit of a problem because he was 7'1", and Miles Dredd is 6'4", and it worked out one time when he accidentally elbowed him in the face because he threw an elbow where a guy's chest would usually be that's guarding him, and it was Miles' face there. But, you know, I think that was the end of the court that was more concerning, you know, and kind of gave him a few too many good looks down the stretch. Although I will say in the first half, I thought it was much better when he was like 3 of 7 from the field in the first half and couldn't really get going.
Yeah, and I think you're gonna play that game, and I think Coach knows that with his team right now this season that he's gonna have to play that mind game against the other team, and hopefully, you know, he's thinking that the players will be able to knock down enough threes to where the other coach feels that they have to take their big man out. But obviously Hunter Dickinson was able to combat some of that stuff, and I mean, you know, we didn't make the threes that we needed to make to get him off the floor, but he was able to, you know, dominate on the end. And a law of averages too, threes are better than twos. So, you know, coach is gonna go ahead and he's gonna shoot. He's gonna tell those guys shoot those threes, and hopefully, you know, me and Hunter Dickinson is only going on the other under end making twos. But I will say, man, I thought, you know, coming off the win against Iowa, I thought the team was gonna come in with a little bit more fire. You know, I wanted that. I wanted them to jump on this game and be like, hey, man, this is another big road test for us. We just got Illinois, you know. And, you know, 2 weeks ago. And we want to come out now, man. We really can set the tone and set the pace of saying, hey, this team is here. You know, I guess another Michigan team that was ranked early in the year. And I wanted them to jump out and kind of show that same tenacity that they had against Illinois, but you kind of didn't see it. I don't know if it was, you know, the Christmas break or the New Year's or whatever it might have been that was a little slow, but I thought I wanted a little more from the team. But and you can see that, you know, when you're going on the road in those environments where you need to be able to be on your best, or at least close to your best game to get a win. You got to have that from everybody from top to bottom, not necessarily just your best player.
Yeah, and, you know, to go back to the shooting a bit, when Andrew Funk and Miles Dredd combined to make 2 of their 12 attempts from 3, probably not going to win many games, right? Like, those guys just got to hit more shots for Penn State to win. You nailed it. They're going to try and hit 3s while you're hitting 2s, and the math says that should work out for them. But basketball, there's a part of randomness to the game, right? Like where, you know, you're just going to go cold sometimes, you're just going to get really hot sometimes. And Michigan was the more efficient team last night. They averaged, I think, 1.3 points per possession. Penn State was around 1.1, and like that's the battle Penn State's trying to win. Right? Yeah. They're not trying to be, you know, at the rim more than you. They're not even necessarily trying to make more threes than you. That's how they're going to get there, right? So they technically are. But the real goal is being more efficient than you. And that comes at the rim. That comes with Pickett's, like, 14-footers that he takes. Funk's step-in 14-footers coming off screens. Like, that's how they're going to try and do that. And last night they didn't. And they're just not going to win those games, right? Especially when it's 0.2 points is the difference there. That's just too much for them to overcome. Credit where it's due, though. I think you're right. I think they came in kind of sleepy and maybe – you know, this was the first matchup with a real big they were facing, and I think they were a little too aware of that, right? Like, too focused and hyper-fixated on, like, okay, this is the battle for tonight. We have to figure this out. This is a big test for that reason, and kind of didn't have the juice off the bat, and I think that was a bit of an issue. But credit to them. They kept coming back in the second half. Michigan kept pulling away. They kept coming back, and ultimately in the last, like, minute and a half, that wasn't the case. But for a game that, like I said, it felt like Michigan had in hand, Penn State was in it. And I think that says a lot about, you know, how far the program has come, because you've seen these games in the past. I've seen these games in the past. Usually it's a 30-point differential, right? Yeah. Like, it's not 10 points at the end of the game. Like, when you're struggling with a big like that, you're not hitting your shots to losing by 30. So I think even the margin of victory for Michigan says a lot about where Penn State is compared to they were, you know, 5-6 years ago.
Oh yeah, for sure. Because one thing Coach Shrewsbury said with this team is that they're going to fight no matter what the score is. No matter if they're up by 20 or they're down by 20, they're going to fight. And you can see that, like you said, they were never, even though they were getting down and it seemed like the shots weren't falling and the big was killing them on the other end, they still fought. They still felt like they were in the game. They still was like, hey, if we hit the next one, we can cut it down to 10. We can be right there. And that's just a credit of what the team is and what the culture is around Penn State basketball. As far as these guys are going to fight no matter what the score, no matter what the time left to the end of the no matter what time is left to the end of the clock, to the end of the buzzer. So, like you said, man, the culture has changed in a lot of ways from before I was in there. Just in general for Penn State basketball, every team is going to fight, is going to continue to go until the buzzer sounds.
Yeah, and there is I think there's a camaraderie that comes with that, right? Like these guys are fighting for each other too. It's not just like you're doing it for yourself. Like they're in it together, and that's a credit to the culture that Micah has built as the head coach. And I think it was very funny. I don't know if you saw it last night. Penn State got a bench warning, right, on Mike Farrelly, and I knew it was Farrelly is a very energetic assistant coach. As soon as I called the bench warning, I knew who it was going to be on because I knew this game was his scout, and I knew like he is. So when they played a non-conference game against Quinnipiac, I sat behind the bench, right, and like he is on the court. Like it is 6-on-5 when it's at the other end of the floor. So he is there, and he's very much involved. So I knew it was going to be on him. They call the bench warning, and then they show the replay later, and of course it's Farrelly like out on the court like yelling and hurries up and goes back. But I don't know if you saw later, Shrewsbury calls a timeout or goes to media timeout or something, and guys started coming off the bench to hype up their teammates and everything. And Micah very jokingly like ushers them back. He's like, no, like don't go out there. Like, and he was smiling and laughing as he did it because he didn't want them to come onto the court. And like, to me, that's like some of the us against them mentality that you need when you're at Penn State. I don't think I'm breaking any news here. Penn State hasn't gotten the calls for 50s, whatever years, right? Like they just don't get the calls that other teams do. They don't get the home court advantage. Like it's always been the case. It's been a point of contention for head coaches for as long as I've covered the team under Chambers. It was for Ferry. It is now for Shrewsbury. I don't think they say it publicly, and for good reason. They will get fined. I will not. But it has always been a thing, right, that they don't get those calls. So I think it's a good thing to have this kind of us against the world mentality when like the hierarchy of the Big Ten is what it is, and you ain't at the top of it.
Mm-hmm. Of course, I was a part of it in my career at Penn State, and sometimes the whistle goes the other way against you. And it could be clear as day, but sometimes everybody makes mistakes, is what I would always say. I wouldn't want to be a referee, especially when I'm done playing. I don't want to be a referee because I think that's one of the hardest jobs there is. But we didn't get a lot of calls, and I think Penn State basketball is not going to get certain calls until you have to earn it. You have to win games. You have to show up every night. You have to make big time wins and win games on the road. But like you said, and like I've said before in previous podcasts with us, that when you go on the road, it's just you. You're going to have the guys that are in the locker room with you. You might have a couple, maybe a player there is going to have his family there that he's from there or close by. So you're going there with 20 people and against an arena full of, in Michigan, full of yellow, and you got to go out there and believe that. It's almost like, like the 300 movie. You got to go out there and you got to believe that, hey, no matter what, we're going to go out there and fight against everybody, and we're going to fight until we can't fight anymore. And I keep bringing this up, but I felt like the team did that against Illinois on the road. They did it. They came out, they believed, they were like, you know what, we're going to punch them right in the mouth, and that's exactly what they did, and they continued to punch throughout the whole game. So they can do it. This team can do it. The team can go on the road and beat ranked team, beat big name teams in the Big Ten as well. So they can do it, and they've got the blueprint to do it. And I think, like I said, I think this is New Year. It's just the Christmas break, everything. And man, they came out a little slow against Michigan. And the good thing about basketball, you have another game coming up, and you got to be able to bounce back from it.
And they do have another game coming up, right? And a pretty big one. Probably the biggest one they're going to have in a minute. They play number 1 Purdue at the Palestra on Sunday. This is the ultimate test, right? Like Hunter Dickinson's a really good test for a team that doesn't have a lot of bigs. You know what's a better test? A 7'4" center who doesn't move a lot but can just lay the ball up by reaching up and placing. Right, like he is enormous. Zach Edey is one of the biggest basketball players that I've ever seen in person. Listen, I'm not like small. I'm 6'2", and like I see basketball players. A lot of them are bigger than me. I see that dude, and I feel like a child, right? Like I feel like he should hold my hand and walk me through a grocery store, and and help me pick things out. This is a massive, massive human being, and they got to deal with that, right? Like that is not going to be easy. They're not going to get shots at the rim. They're not going to get the looks that they want, from in close, especially Pickett, because he's just going to be lurking. And I think this is a great test. The funniest thing about this matchup to me is Micah Shrewsbury has often said that they always seem to face teams right after teams lose, right? Like, so they're extra motivated. And I was in Los Angeles, and I just happened to notice that Purdue lost to Rutgers earlier this week. And I was like, man, the timing on that. Fortunately for Penn State, Purdue plays Ohio State tonight, so there's a chance for them to like take it out on the Buckeyes if that's the case. Now they lose again, then you're in for a hornet's nest on Sunday. But I think that game is going to be like the test of all tests, because Micah also knows that team better than anyone. Grady Eifert, who's on the Penn State staff, knows that team better than anyone. These guys should know what they're getting into. They're going to be well prepared for Purdue, but they're also going to be dealing with the biggest test that they're going to face all season against the Boilermakers.
It's going to be huge. And like you said, man, there's so many connections with just this matchup in general. Purdue being a top 5 team in the country, I'm sure they'll drop with the loss a little bit. Shrewsbury, his connection with Purdue. This whole matchup is going to be, is just so much intensity, so many, everybody's looked on it. I'm sure Pickett and all these guys have already circled this on the schedule. Everybody's been looking at this. This is going to be the big matchup right here. Hey, we knocked this team off. We beat them. This is going to put us on the map. And it will, if it happens. People will it'll get more traction, get more attention, and, maybe even crack the top 25 with the win. You never know. But this game right here, everybody's already intensified it to make this to be the biggest game of the year so far. And they have to go out and play like it. The fans are going to be there. It's going to be a big game. Their team is going to show up. Purdue's going to show up. Penn State has to show up. And it's going to be a clash of 2 great teams and figure out who comes out on top. And you're going to need big games from Funk, Pickett, all those guys. And you're going to need your role players to step up as well. And like you said, we're going with somebody against a 7-4. We need those freshmen to be able to come in and be able to take some hits, take some fouls. If you want, I think Edie shoot maybe 72% something for the free throw line. And if we got to stop him from getting the easy 2, man, we got to foul him. It's something you got to put him on the line and just really just use everybody. We have to use everybody's fouls, everybody's bodies just to keep and wear him down. And at the end of the day, Shrewsbury, we got coach. I'm sure he's going to tell everyone we're going to stick to our game plan. We're going to run and gun. We're going to shoot a lot of threes. We're going to make him chase around. We're going to make him guard ball screens. We're going to make him help in the paint. We're going to kick out for threes. And at the end of the day, you got to have fun. It's a game of basketball. You love it. You've been playing it all your life, man. You go out there and have fun, man. This is what all the training in the summer session 2, all this stuff is really ready for it, and it's ready to pay off, man. You go out there and you play and you have fun and you let the chips fall where they may.
Well, and I think it's interesting you mentioned, right, that they're going to play how they play regardless. Penn State is. And that is, I think, a pretty stark change under Micah Shrewsbury. They want to dictate the terms no matter how good they are. They want to make you play how they play no matter how good they are, no matter how good you are. They just also happen to be really good this year, and they're also facing a really good team here. But the whole idea is to be the thermostat, not the thermometer, right? Like you set the temperature. You aren't going to be the ones that just take the temperature. You're going to set it and dictate how this goes. And I think that's how you beat a team that has a 7'4" center. Like this is what it looks like when you have a small team and you face an enormous team. You spread the court, you shoot, you make them defend on the perimeter, because part of being 7'4" is you're kind of slow and you don't move your feet so quick, and you kind of can't really do anything once you get out on the perimeter. Penn State's disadvantage, right, is this is not a shot at Jalen Pickett, but he is not, I don't know, Tim Frazier when it comes to foot speed or his first step, right? He's a little bit slower, so he's not going to necessarily beat guys off the dribble that way. But they do have guys that can do that, right? Like they've got Cam Winter who can do that. Even Andrew Funk, like you catch him coming off a screen, like he can get downhill on you and blow by you. They need to involve, to me, they need Edie to be involved in like every single ball screen. You need him moving, making decisions, exhausting him. To go back to what they did against Michigan, because I think this is going to be even more effective against Purdue, using Evan Mahaffey in the ball screen, basically either as a ball handler or as a screener, I thought was brilliant. Right, yeah. Mahaffey is 6'7". He's long. He can't really shoot that well, but he's the guy that guy's going to be defending because he's the biggest guy out there, and he's the worst shooter on the court. He's just kind of an average shooter, and he needs his feet set and everything. But if you make Edey defend him on the perimeter and try and, keep his feet going out there, we'll see what happened with Hunter Dickinson last night. Dickinson got blown by a couple of times by Evan Mahaffey because he just had nothing he could do. Mahaffey sets a ball screen, for Jalen Pickett. Pickett hits a pocket pass as he's rolling to the rim, and then Mahaffey's by Edey because he can't react quick enough, right? His feet can't move quick enough. So just, to me, you got to involve that guy in basically every single action. Every second he's on the court has to be exhausting for him. And to me, that's kind of how you wear him out. And then defensively, then it's a little harder, right, for him to be a rim protector because he's tired from, doing everything else defensively. And then on offense, he's even more tired, right? And he's not he's catching maybe some of those passes in the post, and he's just kind of lazily putting them up there because he doesn't have the energy for it. You just have to win all those little battles to me to kind of set it up and make sure that you're in a position where you can, compromise Edey in some way or form.
Yeah, like you said it, man. I think to take away Edey and take away his strengths, you wear him down, and you see it all the time. And in the NBA, even now in Greece, I've seen it. Teams would literally just pick me up full court and just literally try to wear me down I remember my first couple of games over because you don't see full court pressure since college, and I'm sitting there, I was like, man, what's the game plan? And the guy's like, man, we're just gonna foul you and wear you down till you're too tired by the fourth quarter, and that's something that Penn State and Shrewsbury could use, you know what I mean, as well as you said, having a bigger ball handler out there. I think about it like when I was in Milwaukee with the Bucks. It was crazy. It was hard for us, and I was setting the ball screens for Giannis, and Giannis was coming off, and it because point guards don't know how to really guard the ball screen, and bigs don't really know how to get over the ball screen. So it was a hard matchup for a lot of guys. Obviously, Giannis is great, and what he does, so he made the screens look better than what they were. But I see that as something that Shrewsbury can do as well to try to get this guy out, to be able to have him have to guard ball screens as well, and just slow him down as much as you can. And I keep mentioning the pace, and the guys have to run. You got to make shots. I got a big game coming from Funk. I know Pickett is going to do what Pickett's going to do, but I think I've just seeing Funk throughout this year about him making big time shots in big games when they need it. I'm calling it right now. I'm calling Funk making a big time shot for us at the end of the game.
Well, I'm just going to go ahead and add it to your resume now. Elite screener for Giannis, Tim Frazier. We can go ahead and log into the Wikipedia and add that there. Make sure the world knows that you were setting these nasty screens in the NBA. Well, but your point is a good one, though, right? If NBA centers and smalls don't know how to deal with ball screens when they're on the opposite side of it, do you think college kids are going to know how? Right? It's a different world for them. It's something that they haven't experienced. And that, the good thing for Penn State is they can take what happens against Purdue and use it again next week, right, when they play Indiana. Because that is another team that has a high-end big, right? Trace Jackson-Davis, now he's very different, right? Trace is 6'9". He is not 7'4", and he's also an amazing athlete. I covered Trace when he was in high school, out in Indianapolis, and I covered him his final high school season right before he got to Indiana. And he's genuinely an unbelievable athlete at that size, and he's only getting bigger and stronger. I'm sure Shrewsbury's plan will be what everyone's plan is against Trace Jackson-Davis. It's take away his left hand and make him go to his right, because that's generally what teams do. But this is an Indiana team that is athletic. They can run in transition, but they kind of can't shoot. And boy, if there's a team that you want to be able to shoot against, it's Penn State, because you're going to have to keep up. And so this, to me, is one of those games where I think it's going to get heralded as, maybe bigger than or an easier game for Indiana than it's going to be, because Indiana's highly touted right now. They're getting more steam, narrative wise. But to me, this is like a matchup nightmare for the Hoosiers. This is the kind of game that Penn State could come in. It's at home at the Bryce Jordan Center. They can come in and blow them out of the water, right? You get hot from the start. It's 30-13, and suddenly Indiana doesn't have the shooting to keep up. Now, they're athletic and going to run, but Penn State is solid. They don't let you run in transition against them. They don't turn the ball over to give you those chances. Of all the teams of the Big Ten, if I were Penn State, and let's say we're talking about, Championship Sunday, and it's all on the line. They can pick any Big Ten team they want to go into the NCAA tournament. I'm picking Indiana, because to me that's the lack of shooting is just glaring at this point.
See, you're different than me, because you know who I'm picking? I'm picking to get Iowa, Illinois, the two teams I've already beat. But I'm with you. I'm with
you. True.
I'm with you, though. But yeah, the Indiana team, man, like you said, they're a team full of athletes, and like you said, they are trending upward right now. And I think that's something that, they got a couple games. Hopefully they get knocked off and they start heading back down, or even they start feeling themselves. But I do believe, like you said, you get past Purdue, however it might go, you know what I mean? But I think you have another big test in Indiana that you have to really come out and be ready for. You know what I mean? Obviously, I'm wanting to win against Purdue and make that a huge game, and then just continue to ride that wave all the way up into the next one. But if chips don't fall the way we want them to fall, we have to be able to bounce back right away and get ready for, like you said, another big test. Because if you win that game against Indiana, you still in a good position. I think, what is that? They put you 3-3 in the Big Ten. You still, and at the end of the day, we said earlier in the month that, hey, 50-50 in the Big Ten is an NCAA tournament team. And I know I'm looking farther down the road, but at the end of the day, you want to stay 500, stay 50-50 throughout your wins and losses, if not greater, to be able to make yourself eligible for a tournament bid.
Yeah, and I think this is the weird thing, and this is something we can talk about here in a little bit. But because Sunday's game's at the Palestra, it's a home game for Penn State. So it's one of those where we talk about going 10-10. They're probably going to have to steal one on the road, right, at some point to make up for what could be a loss. Now, there are winnable games on the road. They've already beaten Illinois like they have, and to make up for the Michigan State loss and everything. So they're in a good place with that, but I do think that is something that we, worth monitoring down the line. If they drop this game, it's like, the merits of doing this. But I want to talk sort of about the word on campus here and how people are talking about this game and what it looks like and why they're doing this Palestra matchup, right? Because it's something we've seen more and more in recent years. You played there when Penn State played Penn, right? Penn's home arena, the Palestra. This is, I think it's one of the coolest things they do, mostly because I get to go, right? Like, the Palestra is great. Like, the Palestra is one of my favorite places to go. A few years ago, they played Iowa, and I think it was like 180 degrees in there, and everyone, including the floor, was covered in sweat, like reporters, fans, everyone. They had the giant fans in the corners that they were blowing them. Like, they were doing whatever they could to dry the entire arena out. But it's like the cathedral of college basketball, right? That place is amazing. I love going there. Yeah. It's one of my favorite places. They do it basically to get into Philly, right? It helps with recruiting and everything. It helps with, sort of getting those inroads and giving yourself more of a presence in Philadelphia because there's a lot of competition and recruiting there. But I'm curious from your standpoint, was it also 450 degrees when you played in the Palestra? Because I swear to God, that was the hottest building I've ever been in my entire life.
When we played, obviously it was 10 to 12 years ago. I keep throwing that out there, but it wasn't that hot. But I do remember that, when the sun was going down, because it was an early game, that, they had the glass up top. So if you shot the ball in one of the corners, like, the sun was literally beaming in your eyes, as it was going down. But I think the biggest thing about this is it's something I think that Chambers started, really trying to get huge around the recruiting in Philly and around the area, getting guys from Philadelphia up to Penn State. Is that obviously the Palestra has so much culture from the coaches, from the games that have been playing there, just in general about Philadelphia basketball. The Palestra is one of the, obviously one of the top places to play at as far as, the culture and just what about growing up in Philadelphia from what I've heard. And to be able to have a game there against a top 2, top 3 team in the country, the buzz is around. Everybody knows it. And at the end of the day, it helps as well from recruiting, like you mentioned, to be able to have this game, especially in Philly. I'm sure there'll be a lot of recruits just sitting there and they're watching and say, hey, let's go to Palestra for the game tonight, to be able to see necessarily Penn State basketball against, a top team. It's just going to bring so much energy to everybody around, because now that the fans that you want to drive up to 3.5 hours to Penn State, that would decide, maybe not. It's supposed to snow. You never know. I'm not sure the weather, but I know that fans have decided that, man, we want to see Penn State Purdue, but do we really want to drive the 3.5 hours and 3.5 hours back? Never knows what happened. And I've made that drive. That drive is not an easy drive. You're going around mountains and everything. It's not the easiest. So I think that now that just gives that a possibility of people that are in Philadelphia, that are close around everywhere, even Delaware, guys are just going to come down and just be right there. And I expect that arena to be sold out, to be able to see Penn State versus one of the top teams in the country. And as I keep mentioning, man, these guys are going to show up. These players, man, we got the veteran players that we've had that have been in college for a while, man. These guys got to show up. Big game, man. I used to love it. Like, I'm getting goosebumps now because I used to love it, man. We would go to places. We would go play Michigan State, all these guys, when they were top 5, top 25. I was so hyped to play. I was like, man, because it's a win-win for you. It's a win-win and a win-win for you. You know what I mean? At the end of the day, you go out there, you beat one of the top teams in the country, you play well, you're a big man on campus. Everything is love, man. You get to go back. Everybody's going to class the next day, no matter if class is out. You know what I mean? Everybody's excited. Everybody's cheering for you. You got the fans are back at the airport when you come back, man. It's an amazing experience. And then, you know, let's say you do fall short, but at the end of the day, you see where you are as a team, and that's where you see what you have to do. You see what it is to become one of those teams, and I think you have to use that. You know what I mean? You guys can't go in there with any fear. You go out there and just play the game and just have fun with it. And at the end of the day, you come out victorious in both ways because you understand where you are, where you need to be. And at the end of the day, you see where, you know, I mean, you come out there with a win, you get to celebrate, make that drive back up to Penn State, listen to the music, watch movies, I don't know, whatever you decide to do on the way back up to State College.
Yeah, you mentioned the snow on the ground, by the way. It just reminded me, that Iowa game, it was 150 degrees in the building, and it was also like negative 12 outside, which made it 100 times worse. There was snow on the ground. Everything was icy. The drive was miserable. Like you said, you've made that drive before. And like, so I've got like this massive jacket on. I've got a beanie on and everything. And I walk in the arena, and it's like I'm in a sauna immediately. Like I'm disrobing as quickly as I can, trying to get everything off so I can try and not sweat to death there. It was... But again, would do it 100 times over. I love that arena so much. It's so great. The one thing I do think is interesting that works against Penn State is, and people will be able to tell from my hat, I'm a Philly sports fan, the Eagles play at 4:25 on Sunday, and I think I'm fairly certain it's a home game, so it's literally the worst time possible. That being said, people will fill that arena, right? Because it's the Palestra. I guarantee you people will fill that arena. It's going to be an awesome atmosphere. I'm excited to cover it. Like I love seeing stuff like that, sort of as the unbiased observer. You just get to go to a place like that. We've all got our bucket list stuff. Like I got to cover the Rose Bowl, like, you know, awesome. 3 days ago, whatever it was. And 6 days after that, I get to go to the Palestra. You know what I mean? Like it's one of those weeks where, yes, I'm jet lagged, I'm tired, but I'm also very much enjoying myself. So no one should feel too bad for me. I'm having a good time, I promise. But you nailed it though. This is a litmus test to me. This is you find out exactly where you're at. No matter what happens on Sunday, you know as a program exactly where you're at, and I think that is incredibly important in a season like this where you could make the NCAA tournament. Yeah. But I think that is a good place to call it quits for today. This is, you know, a big game. I'm excited to cover it. I'm sure you're excited to watch it. You know, this is going to be an important one for Penn State. But you can follow me on Twitter at Jon Sauber. You can follow Tim on Twitter at TimFraze23. Thanks for tuning in, and have a great day.
Beyond the Big Ten is a network of podcasts that aims to be your go-to resource for all things Big Ten. We cover the entire conference with shows hosted by ex-players and athletic alumni, aiming to be your go-to source of information and entertainment for your favorite team. Hosted by ex-Big Ten players, media, and insiders, our podcasts are focused on giving diehard fans and those alums an inside scoop about the teams and people that make the Big Ten Conference one of the most watched and most talked about conferences in sports. We're excited to talk Big Ten basketball with you wherever you may be. Subscribe now.